back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today to talk to you all about some exciting book reviews. I have been a judge for the SPFBO, which stands for the Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off, for the last few years. This will be my second year of judging, and I really enjoy it. It's a competition that I can really get behind to support self-published authors, and it always exposes me to loads of new books, loads of new authors that I've never heard of before. Some of them are good, some of them are not so much my thing, but it's always a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed the competition so far. We are doing the judging for the 2018 competition, and it ends, I think it's May. And by we, I mean myself and the other judges, who are all different bloggers and reviewers. I'll link all their channels and blogs below. I'll link all of their blogs and reviewing sites below for you guys to go and check out. We are currently in the process of reading the finalists. There are 10 finalists. I have currently read 9 of the finalists, so quite a few. I'm just working my way through the last one now, and I'm going to start reviewing them for you. So you will already have seen my review of the finalists that I put forward. That is The Anointed. I will put a link up in the cards for you guys to go and check that out if you haven't seen it. It's non-spoiler, so you can find out a lot about that book there and why I put it forward as my finalist. It's one I loved. Not sure everyone else is loving it as much as me, sad times, but it's all subjective, it's a competition. So with that in mind, I am going to talk about 3 of the other finalists that I read today, and I'm going to go through them in order of my least favourite up to my favourite, but I will note that every single book that I've read so far, which is a finalist, has got at least 6 from me out of 10, which is not a bad score. So, you know, they all have something to offer, even if they're not personally my favourite thing. And you may want to go and check out some of the other judges, their reviews as well, because it might be that they have a similar taste to you, more so than I do. So I will link all of their reviews down below, and Mark Lawrence's blog, where you can go and find out how the competition is going and see all the reviews as they come in, which is very exciting. So, without further ado, let's get on with me talking about 3 of the finalists that I read and giving you a review. So, the first book I want to talk to you guys about is called We Ride the Storm, and this is a book that has an absolutely beautiful cover and a really interesting sounding premise. So, we follow 3 different characters in this story, and we're actually following the story as it is wartime in this world. War is ravaging the land, and all the different types of people within the world have to kind of contribute their bit, and certain people who are outstanding in some way are the ones that we are focusing on in our character POVs. Now, this book is one I actually really thought I would love, and it's one that I turned out not to love quite as much as I hoped. It does have an Asian inspired theme throughout the whole thing. It definitely has flavours of sort of nomadic people, and I really enjoyed that element of it, but I don't think that you see as much as I was expecting of that. It's a lot more about this war that is ongoing in the background and all the people kind of trying to do their own thing to survive and get through it. I don't know if maybe this was a case of me just having really high expectations of the book because I'd heard so much good hype about it beforehand, and often with self-published reads you don't hear hype, so the fact that I did was quite great. But maybe I just set myself and my bar too high. There was also one POV character who I just personally did not get along with, and I think it's always hard to really enjoy a book if you particularly don't like or don't care about one of the characters, and that is kind of what I found in this book. So that was a bit of a downer. So this is a fantasy world with a twist. We have an emperor who sits on the throne, and we also have the Levanti, who are a horse-riding culture and class of warriors. As I said, it does definitely take influence from sort of Asia, and particularly feudal Japan, which is an era that I've certainly enjoyed reading about, books inspired by that in the past. And I actually think that there is a good, strong sense of atmosphere throughout the book as you're reading it. I also believe that there might be a series set in the same world, following some of the other characters, which was previously published. I'm not certain on that, but I believe that's the case, and maybe that is
part of the reason why I didn't get as much from it as some of the other judges who I think might have read that series previously. So personally, I think that maybe some of the associations that the characters had with other characters from the previous series might have been a bit lost on me. So the characters that we're following are quite different people. We have Ra-e-Torin. He is trying his best to get his people to safety, but unfortunately along the way they get captured and they kind of end up with people who have completely different beliefs to them, and they originally were part of their sort of tribe, but now they have changed their ways and they're doing things very differently, and it's not necessarily the way that Ra would like it to go. Next up we have Princess Miko, who is kind of a hostage almost in her own palace. The emperor who is ruling is not her father, and therefore she is kind of almost treated like a prisoner in the palace. Her mother is married to the emperor, but she is actually known as the daughter of a traitor, and so she is severely looked down upon and frowned upon by most people, despite the fact that she is actually a very brilliant character who has quite a lot going for her and was certainly one of my more favoured characters in this story. And finally we have Cass, who is a whore slash assassin in training. She's kind of doing odd jobs here and there, and she is someone who I think felt the most muddled to me. She actually has this presence in her mind who is quite sinister, and we don't really know how she got it at first, and we're kind of trying to uncover a bit more about it all. It's a bit of a weird storyline, and I think it was quite a confusing storyline at times as well. So let's start off by talking a little bit about Ra. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I actually hated Ra, and I think a lot of people love him, so maybe this is my biggest problem with the book. I personally did not give a damn about this character. I just did not connect, I did not care. He is one of the most sort of sickly sweet characters that I've ever encountered, and I certainly just did not enjoy kind of sitting there and reading his plotline. I found it a real struggle to connect with him or just, you know, care. I feel like I kind of took almost an instant dislike to his kind of lack of action and the way that he just complied with everything and sort of meekly took stuff. Like, he wouldn't agree with everything, but he wouldn't do a lot about it for a while, and I found him so frustrating as a character to root for, because I did not think he was making good decisions. I don't mean to say that this is a reflection of the writing. I think for me it was just purely based on the fact that this character and I did not get along. We did not see eye to eye at all. But I did like the other two characters. Normally if I'd read a book with a character I disliked as much as I disliked Ra, I think I would have just given up, but because the other two characters were a lot more interesting and because they had a lot more intrigue involved in their plot lines, I definitely wanted to carry on and find out where it was all kind of heading to. And I also would say that although he is quite boring to me, his parts weren't the main bit. They sort of all had a fairly even part. So yeah, I didn't like Ra. Moving on to Miko. I actually really enjoyed her as a character. As I mentioned before, she's quite a strong character and she does definitely defy the stereotype of kind of being a female who is actually very knowledgeable and has a lot of good ideas for what she could do with the Empire if she was to take it over. She's quite an outgoing character, and although at first she kind of comes across as someone who could easily fall into the trap of just being an object of desire, she doesn't end up that way at all. Her mother immediately starts off the story by kind of saying that she needs to start looking for someone for Miko to marry, but then we quickly find out that Miko is going to defy the stereotypes and do her own thing. And I have to admit that I actually really liked the way that she defied a lot of my expectations. I've read a lot of fantasy and a lot of it is very predictably kind of misogynistic or very male dominated, and the females are kind of left in the corner a bit, and she definitely wasn't. She stood out on her own and did her own things and took charge where she needed to, even though the odds are very much against her a lot of the time. I think that she probably took top spot for me in terms of character, and she's probably the one that I would rather see more of than some of the others, but yeah, she's probably one that you don't see as much of as Ra. Finally, we have Cass, who, as I say, she's this character who's got this presence inside her mind who kind of talks to her and she argues with it a lot, and we're not really sure kind of how she got it or what it is, but we just know that it kind of advises her. Whether it's good advice or not is a whole other matter. And we're following her story, and I think she's quite fascinating at first because you have all this mystery surrounding her and all this intrigue, but as the story goes on, I just didn't quite connect with her as much as I wanted, and I feel like her story has some confusing elements. I think she's also one of the ones who is better developed in terms of backstory. We do actually have a backstory for her that we find out as we go through the book, and I liked seeing that because I think that just added a bit more dimension to her character. But I feel like I don't know her as well as the other two. I would like to see more from Cass. So for the plot, I feel like it was a fairly standard one. I don't think I was that surprised by anything, and it was a fairly moderate pace throughout the whole thing. The ending is definitely quite dramatic, with a lot of warfare on all different fronts. But personally, I think a lot of fantasy is quite slow, and I wouldn't say this is any exception to that rule. I will say that this is a low fantasy in that it does not actually contain very much magic at all. You see hints of it, but there is very little that you kind of can focus on for the majority of the book. So personally, I like books with a lot more magic than this. That's just personal preference though. So as I said, in the end, I gave it a 6 out of 10 or 3 out of 5. And I really did think that the two characters, the two female characters, Cass and Miko, were actually very interesting, but Ra's story completely put me off. So 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5, 6 out of 10. That's kind of what I've gone for. I definitely think the editing was good. It was a solidly written book, but for me, the character let it down, but it's personal preference. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this one. Do let me know, especially if you are planning to read it. I know a lot of the other judges absolutely love this, so I'm certainly in the minority with this one, giving it a slightly lower rating. But yeah, let me know your thoughts if you have read it or if you plan to read it. The next one I want to talk about is called Ruthless Magic, and this one is one that I certainly enjoyed. I had a lot of fun reading it. It's quite an easy read. I would say this feels almost kind of borderline YA adult because it is very gruesome at times and dark, but also, well, ruthless as the name suggests, but also it is a book that I think feels like you can get into it very quickly and easily. It feels like it's aimed at a fast pace and something to keep you gripped rather than kind of a slow build. It's very much fast paced, you're in, stuff starts happening, the characters are in peril, and that kind of continues for most of the book, to be honest. So we follow a couple of different characters. The main ones who we start the story off with are Finn, who is a Lockwood. His family has great standing in the magical community, and in fact I think his uncle or someone is like the leader of the community, and he's very, very well known as this head of everything. But Finn has very mediocre powers. He can do magic, but he's nowhere near as good or as qualified as any of the others in his family. So he has kind of this complex about being given things, and the way that the society works in this world is that you have to either complete, I think it's some sort of examination, and if you do complete that and you pass, then you can go on and have magic. If you fail it, then you have to be stripped of your magic, or you can decide instead to declare for the exam, which means you go through a load of different tests and examinations, no one really knows what they are, in order to keep your powers and prove your worth. So Finn is our first main character. He has been given everything in his life. Even though he's mediocre, he's more than likely going to get through everything and be allowed to keep his magic because he is from the right family. On the other hand, we have Rocio, I think that's how you say her name, I'm not certain, Rocio Lopez, and she is a character who is from a very disadvantaged background. She's not someone who's been given everything. She's actually a very, very powerful, very, very good magic user, but she is from the wrong type of family, and so the people in power do not want her to continue to keep her powers, and so they do not let her progress and keep all her powers. Instead, she has to declare for the exam if she wants to keep them, which of course she does. So we follow Finn and Rocio as they kind of become friends over the course of the exam. They have each grown up with magic, but they've learned things very differently. Finn is academy trained, he has been to the best schools and had the best education, whereas Rocio is a little bit more interpretive and kind of, you know, she leads by kind of feeling the magic rather than being told how to do things. It's a bit more intuitive for her. They both get a letter, Finn saying he's in, Rocio saying she's out, and they both declare for the exam. Rocio because she has to, Finn because he feels bad about taking someone else's place when he doesn't really deserve it. And if either of them fail, along with all the other classmates and people who have joined them on the exam, they will be burned out and have their magic stripped away from them. Now from this point onwards, it's kind of almost like the passage to the Philosopher's Stone, where you go through all these trials and you have different things in each room and different scenarios. It's almost like a Hunger Games situation. It's kind of crossed with all of those various things where you have trials, you have battles, you have things attacking you that you don't know where they're coming from. There's examiners who are constantly watching, so in that way it does feel a lot like the Hunger Games. But all of these trials are deadly to people if they do them wrong, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of everything here. It's kind of like you don't have a lot of choice. You have to win, you have to pass, otherwise your powers are going to be stripped from you. But you don't know what you're facing. You go into it completely blind, and some of these challenges are ruthless, they are dark, they are horrible, they really test people. So it is a dark book. But I think it is very action-packed and very fun. There is some insta-love, which is not my favourite thing. But in general, it's an easy read. It's one I read through in about a day or so, and it was very quick to get through and enjoy. Very much a page-turner. So for that reason, I certainly had fun with it. I do think occasionally the characters of Finn and Rocio were a little bit hard to tell the difference, because they're both POV characters, and unless you're on the chapter opening where it says which character you're following, it can sometimes be a little bit tricky to work out who is who, because they don't have completely distinct voices. But besides that, it was a fun read and I enjoyed it. So I ended up giving this one a kind of 3.25, which is a 6.5, and I definitely think this is one that would appeal to a lot of people. Next up, I read Sympathy of the Wind, which is a book that I completely loved, and this book, I think it had barely any reviews before SPFBO, and now it's got quite a few. It's definitely one that I think a lot of people would like, and it's probably one that I think would appeal most to people who have a similar taste to me, because it's certainly one of my highest ranked so far on the leaderboard. I personally really enjoyed this, and it's got a lot of the things I like about fantasy, which is a lot of magic, a lot of airships and new environments and worlds that feel quite different and quite unique to fantasy rather than too inspired by a place in reality. There's a lot of really interesting elements to it to do with people who are the rain catchers. They have to go out and catch the rain. It has a corrupt ruling power and it has a lot of scope, so you are following a vast array of different places and people, which is always good. There were quite a few twists and turns that I didn't see coming, which I always enjoy, and I think it has a darker side too, and managed to really hook me in quite early in the story. So although this is a longer read and it takes a bit of time, I definitely think it's worth reading. In this one we're following quite a few different characters. We have Serna, who is a young woman who's living in an orphanage. She is kind of almost at the age where she can leave and make her own decisions, but she's not quite there. And in the meantime, she has been apprenticing on a ship and learning from the deckhands there. She works with the Raincatcher Guild, and she goes on sort of small scouting missions and missions to go and catch the rain. She is a very feisty character, and she learns a lot more about herself as the book goes on, because initially we think she is just a standard kind of orphan, but as we go further we realise that her backstory is not traditional in any sense of the word. She actually has a lot more going on than even she realised, and she is a very key player in the events that transpire as the story unfolds. We also have Tierra, who is a woman involved with the captain of the ship that Serna is apprenticing on. She and the captain have been great together for a long time. They have a deep trust and love between them, and she's actually a more minor character until she is forced by magic to do something absolutely terrible that puts her name into dirt and also makes everyone look for her and hunt her down. Basically puts a target on her back, and then she becomes a much more major character because she is very much involved in the plot by then. Her story takes a very bleak turn, and I think I liked her POV for the resilience that she has even after everyone is against her. We then have Tyson Gallows, who is a man desperate to find out what happened to his fiancée. She went missing, and he believes that there is a lot more to that story than he was initially told, so he is constantly trying to find out what really happened, and in doing so and in his investigations he finds out a lot more about the dark undercurrents of the city, the nefarious deeds and societies that are kind of undercover, and I think his plot also interwove very well with the other two characters as we get further on. It mixes the three of them really, really nicely. So the world is one where water needs to be shipped in by airships, hence the Raincatchers Guild, and electricity comes from these giant big spires that generate it in storms. Lots of people work in guilds, which are fairly corrupt on the whole. There are brothels and there are pimps who pimp the others out. To be honest, it's not the sort of place you would want to live. It's very shady. There's a lot of dark dealings going on all the time, but obviously it is a hubbub of life as well, and it's kind of a crazy city. There are quite a few magical elements, as I said before, and magic and experiments with magic are kind of sweeping the nation very quietly. A lot of people don't realise that experimentation has been going on and what it is or where people are going, but some of them do, and those who have found out about it are usually either involved or silenced, so it's all quite a dark situation. There is also a constant imminent threat of war from the neighbouring people, and we have a very dark current throughout everything. So I found that this it hit a few good things for me. It definitely kept me intrigued throughout the whole thing, and I really liked that. It was an absolute pleasure to read this one. I certainly fell in love with the characters in the world, and I would definitely pick up the sequel straight away. I don't think it's out yet, but I would. When it comes out, I will definitely do so. I really enjoyed it. I just think it has so much going for it and so many good elements, and I think it was very well written in the whole as well, so I really, really do recommend checking this one out. I gave it a 4.25, which is 8.5 out of 10, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. So that is all of the books I'm going to talk about in this video. As I say, I've got plenty of others still to review, so you will be seeing some more reviews from me coming very soon for SPFBO. But in the meantime, do let me know which of these sounds most interesting. Check out the scoreboard below so you can see all the other judges' thoughts, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.